Reed, Mr. Parr.
Yes.
We now call the Board of Supervisors January 10th meeting to order. We could all rise for a moment of silence. All right, let's say the pledge. Mr. Barton.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we are now in reorganization. Candy.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year to everyone. Pursuant to the applicable provisions of 15.2-1416 of the Code of Virginia and Chapter 2, Article 2 of the Code of the County of Nelson, Virginia, the Nelson County Board of Supervisors conducts an annual organizational meeting at the board's first meeting in January of each year. The first order of such business would be the election of the chair. So I will now open the floor for nominations for Chair of the Board of Supervisors for 2023.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion. Before I say so, I'm the person who's, I guess, next in line. But I think for a couple of reasons, one of which I think Jesse's done a really nice job, and that we need to continue to do what we're doing, and that my health is not what I would want it to be. And I feel that it's best for the county that I don't do that particular job. And so I like to make a motion that for the second year in a row, Jesse Rutherford be the chairman of the board.
Okay, so we have a nomination for Mr. Rutherford as Chair for 2023. Are there any other nominations? Okay, the
Need a
floor.
second for that? I'll second the nomination.
Okay, thank you. The floor is now closed for the election of chair, and I guess we now need a motion to elect Mr. Rutherford as chair.
I so move.
Second.
All right, being duly moved and properly seconded to elect Jesse Rutherford as chair for 2023. Amanda, call the vote. Mr. Harvey,
No.
Mr. Barton,
Yes.
Mr. Parr,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford.
Yes.
All right, and now, I'm sorry, I can turn the meeting back over to Chair Rutherford for nominations for vice chair.
All right, do we have any nominations for vice chair?
I would like to nominate Mr. Parr.
Motion for Mr. Parr. Are there any other nominations at this time? Hearing no other nominations at this time, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote for Mr. Parr as vice chair. Amanda?
Mr. Harvey,
Yes.
Mr. Barton,
Yes.
Mr. Parr,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford.
Yes. All right. Moving on to, do we have to do secretary and treasurer? No, I didn't think so. So then we will go on to appointments.
Well,
Or is there
the
something
second
else?
order of business is the first part of Resolution R 2023-01, the annual organizational meeting of the board, where you set your meeting date, time, location as such. We've included in the resolution on the first page the current schedule for 2023 be in the General District Courtroom in Nelson County Courthouse on the second Tuesday of each month, beginning at 2 p.m. and reconvening thereafter at 7 p.m. The resolution also allows that should the regular meetings fall on any legal holiday, the meeting shall be on the next following regular business day without any action of any kind by the board unless otherwise canceled. It also provides for, should the chairman or vice chairman, if the chairman is unable to act, find and declare that weather or other conditions are such that it's hazardous for members to attend the regular meetings, the meetings will be continued on the following Tuesday.
Okay.
So I think, and then it also prescribes Robert's Rules of Order shall be observed as the rules for conducting business of the Board of Supervisors, and the agenda for all meetings of the board shall be established by the clerk of the board in consultation with the chairman. And then the second page of that resolution considers the board's annual appointments to boards and commissions, which is displayed here on the screen.
Looking at this, I think generally speaking, the first page is consistent with what we have done in prior years. I don't think does anyone have any interest in changing anything on the first page before we go to the second page? Nothing. All right. So on the second page, when it comes to appointments, I do not wish to serve on the Planning Commission any further. I have conferred with Mr. Reed on that one, and he has agreed to serve in that capacity, barring anyone else wanting to nominate someone else for that role. So I would suggest that if we did approve this, that we would approve it with that amendment of putting Mr. Reed on the Nelson County Planning Commission.
I so move.
Okay. Motion for Mr. Barton. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second for Mr. Reed. Any further discussion?
And this is for resolution R 2023-01, the entire thing.
Correct. The entire thing with that amendment.
Right.
Yep. All right. We have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do roll call vote.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Carl?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes. Great. Are we organized, Candy?
Yes, sir.
All right. Anything else we need? All right, moving on to, now that we have a committee, I thank you all for letting me do this another year. Look forward to a very productive year and seeing the county forward in hopefully maybe a little bit less stressful year than this past one. So moving on into public comments at this time. We do have folks who've signed up. Mr. Reed will be our timekeeper. Grayson Morgan. And keep in mind, when you come to speak, you have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record. If you're speaking for a group, please specify who that group is. The chair may recognize you to have 5 minutes. And we will give you a little bit of a heads up that you're getting close to the end of time, and the chair may elect to give you an additional 30 seconds. So that's rules moving forward. So, Mr. Morgan.
Good afternoon.
Bring it up.
Good afternoon, board, members, audience. My name is Grayson Morgan. My address is 1328 Double Gate Road, Davidsonville, Maryland. I am also, my wife and I are property owners here in Nelson County, Lot B on Winery Lane in the Mill Hill Homeowners Association over in Roseland. And I'm speaking on behalf of my wife and I as property owners, not on behalf of the Homeowners Association. It has come to our attention through recent activities and permit approvals for special events in Nelson County. The county code and permit processes do not take into account the relationship of a property to an HOA. In Virginia, HOAs are defined and empowered to regulate their members per state law. This lack of awareness about a property's HOA status can and has, in the past permits that have been issued by the county, led to conflicts between the county and the HOAs by approving activities which are either expressly prohibited or regulated by the HOA. Specific areas that are of issue: campgrounds, noise pollution, lighting, special event permits, and zoning. County code makes exemptions for businesses in these areas, but does not take into account if that business is also located within an HOA. One of the things that I have recommended, speaking with county employees in the zoning and permit office, are recommended changes to the special event or temporary event permit to include lines which request that the submitter state whether or not the property in question is part of an HOA. And if so, that the other property owners within that HOA have also approved of that special temporary event permit or other permits which are authorized by the county. I hope that those changes will take place. Also, an issue, if you do a search for a temporary event permit in Nelson County,
30 seconds.
the permit that actually comes up is missing the requirements page. That those requirements are an actual separate Word document. Unfortunately, when that permit is filled out and sent to state officials, state police, the state health departments, VDOT, they do not know if the permit request is complete or not because it's missing the requirements page. And the example that I mentioned previously, those requirements were missing, and yet that permit was approved at both the county and state level. I hope the board will look into this and work to improve the protections for homeowners who also happen to be members of an HOA. Thank you for your time.
All right. Diane McNaught.
Morning, gentlemen, ladies. I'm your representative for on the John board. And I'm here representing John and the need for expanded transit here in Nelson County. Just a couple of things that I get telephone calls from people in the county that need things that pertain to John. Recently, I had a Region 10 manager call me. She has a client that got a job, needs the job, and has no transportation, and was asking what was the schedule of John's bus service. We're down to a 2-day service, so people can't have a full-time job that need a full-time job. Also, I've been working with a family, a low-income family at the low-income apartments. You might have seen him panhandling at the beginning of the food line. He was trying to feed his wife and 2-year-old son. He had a job. He worked at the ski barn on the 151 side. He would work every day. They loved him there, but he couldn't get there. And I transported him several times when he was desperate for money, and we could take him over in the morning and pick him up in the evening. And we should be able to have in Nelson County a transit service that takes care of that just by expanding it. I had another case manager call me. She had a client that worked at the food line at night. This was in the wintertime, and he couldn't get home. He lived in Shipman, 6 miles away, and he was upset because he would have to walk in the winter on a road that isn't walkable safely 6 miles to get home. He normally has a friend who's a Lyft driver in Charlottesville that would come pick him up and take him home. But he was otherwise detained, and this man couldn't get home, and he didn't have a way. So the woman called me, I called the man, I drove over and picked him up and took him home. I live at the Brent's Gap on the other side. You know, I may be 8 or 9 miles as the crow flies from Lovingston. It's just that I'm not a crow, and I have to drive around. That's 25 miles each way. So we're here to support the budget recommendation to expand the job services in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Harrington.
We're a team. We're a group. We are here in support of the expanded transportation services.
Can you bring your mic down?
Sure. We're here to support the expanded transportation services for Nelson County.
What's your name and address?
My name is Linda Harrington, a Petrovich.
Okay.
We live in Stony Creek in Ellie's Ford, and we are involved with an organization, Neighbors Helping Neighbors, called Here to Stay in Wintergreen. And it's a nonprofit that was established officially in 2021. And we have been very, very busy helping our members get to medical appointments and to, not just for recreational transportation, but for very important transportation needs. We now have 150 members in our organization. We have 50 volunteers. And those volunteers are putting in approximately 400 to 500 miles a week, taking people here and there and everywhere. We go as far as Cantops to the west, or to the east, and we go as far as Fishersville to the west. We go out north to the airport road, getting people to doctors and facilities. Some of our residents in Wintergreen are needing in-home care, and they are looking for people to come out with. They prefer to hire people who are licensed, and unfortunately, most of those licensed people are in Charlottesville. And unfortunately, when they work for a licensed agency, they make about $12 an hour. Well, making $12 an hour and spending extra money on gas just doesn't cut it for them. So many of our people in our area, and I'm not just saying for Stony Creek, I'm also thinking of the greater Nellie Fords area, which we're learning about more all the time. They need these services desperately, and they need good services. And if people from Charlottesville had transportation out to our area, that would help greatly.
Hello, so I'm Kate Petrovich, also part of Here to Stay in Wintergreen, and I'm looking at it from the other side, because when I drive over here to Livingston, this is where everything is. The courthouse is here, Blue Ridge Medical is here, the library is here, the Heritage Center is here, the Nelson Center is here. All these things are things that not just those of us in Stony Creek, but those of us on the other side of Stony Creek would like to be able to take advantage of. I won't say how old I am, but imagine, if you will, someone who's like 85 years old. You want them driving over here at night for a meeting. They want to be an active citizen. But if there's John or a facility like that to get people back and forth safely, that's something to consider. You would really hope that you will support this. I know financially it's a big leap, but I think that there's a lot for everybody to be gained from this. Everybody, both sides, everybody, workers, employers, people who want to just come over and get a book out of the library. So thank you very much.
All right. Brad Burdette?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, county administrator. My name is Brad Burdette. I'm at 135 Pine Hill Lane, Norwood, Virginia. And I've had the pleasure of serving on the John board as a citizen member representing Nelson County. John is unique in the type of service it provides to the citizens of Nelson County. As many of you know, and I'm sure you've heard from the citizenry, that transportation is in short supply, especially in our rural communities. Transportation services like John opens the doors of access to all citizens to get to and from work, enjoy recreational activities, grocery trips, and much needed medical and counseling appointments. These activities contribute to the overall health of our community, and a healthy community is something we're all striving for. One issue that is inherent to transportation in rural communities is low population density. Although we enjoy our rural community, low population density can create pockets of citizens that are underserved, and as a result have more challenges coordinating and finding reliable transportation. The expansion of service will allow for working families, seniors, young adults to have more options for scheduling appointments, reliable transportation to and from work sites, and it adds an additional building block of reliable transportation infrastructure in the county. And given the current inflation and state of our national economy, John gives working families an additional means to address transportation costs. John allows for citizens to be self-sufficient and creates independence for our disabled citizens. In our current job market, Nelson is competing with other rural communities for talented employees. We know that there is no lack of jobs, but there's a laundry list of barriers that keep people unemployed. Transportation being at the top of that list. Winter Green is one of our top employers in the county. And looking on their website today, they had 20 positions that were open for employment. And most citizens with a high school education could qualify for that employment. We have the citizens and we have the jobs, but we need the investment from you so that we build a transportation infrastructure together. Thank you for your time that you've allotted to me today for comments.
Robert Gubish? Gubish?
Robert Gubish, 334 Rainbow Ridge Road, Father. And I'm here to renew the interest in the COVID story because it continues to go on and it's affected the whole county. And it's continuing to affect the whole county. So I present to the board, I'm going to donate this book to you all. It's a book titled We've Been Played by Dr. Scott Jensen. And just a couple quotes. Here's one from John Adams in the book. Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passion, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. And then further along here by Dr. Scott Jensen, in an age of information where both disinformation and misinformation abound, complicated by never-ending propaganda and political agendas, it has never been more important to accurately discern what is true. And this book by Dr. Scott Jensen shares a great deal of evidence that we have, in fact, as the title states, we've been played. There's a lot of pure criminality that has been happening behind the scenes. So I'm going to donate a copy of this book to the board, and I know you all are going to fight over who's going to get to read it first. But you'll just have to work that out in your own diplomatic ways. So I'll leave this copy with the county administrator. Thank you for your time, and it's a great pleasure to see Mr. Blue Eyes back in the chair.
All right. Ryan. Lightner. I wanted to say Lightyear. It's hard.
Good call worse. Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Ryan Leitner with the Nelson Community Wellness Alliance. Thank you for allowing me to join you today. For those who are unfamiliar with the Alliance, we're a nonprofit organization here in Nelson. We promote wellness by eliminating barriers to access and increasing the availability to health resources in Nelson County. Recently, we received a $3 million federal funding to start a community health worker training program right here in Nelson. Community health workers connect people to services and resources to improve health outcomes here in Nelson. So not only is this program improving the healthcare in the community, but it's also creating jobs. So there are three key areas that we're focusing on in this program: providing the training to become a healthcare worker, providing apprenticeships to those trainees so that they can continue to grow their career in that field, and enabling services. And a big part of that enabling services, like we've heard already today, and we'll hear more from later, is reducing the barriers to access to care, which goes back to transportation and the access to transportation through JAWS. So the Alliance is supporting JAWS in its efforts to continue to expand its services throughout Nelson, to work for the betterment of the healthcare workers and the citizens of Nelson County. We'll continue to work with John and the Board of Supervisors to continue to support that expansion. Thank you.
Sure. That is all who I have currently on the list. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in public comments? Hearing none, we now close the public comment section of our agenda. Moving on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Reed, any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? Hearing none, passes unanimously. Moving on to presentations, VDOT report. Robert, I have to say, my compliments for the Godfrey Miles sign placement. That was really great attendance, great speaking, and please thank our representative, Mr. Dotson, for attending.
I'll pass that along to him. He was very honored to be there. And, just a very well planned ceremony. Nelson, Kelly, they did a great job.
That's right.
Jesse, you did a great job too, so good to do things like that.
That's right. So thank you for coming to that.
I don't have a whole lot to report on today. I did want to talk a minute about probably in a couple of months, we'll be working on the 6-year plan, secondary road 6-year plan, revising that and updating that for FY 24 through 30. And I was talking to Kenny, I'm going to send her the last year's plan and the unpaved road priority list for you all to just get familiar with again and be looking at any roads you want added to that list, as well as looking at the priorities. So probably in April, we'll schedule a public hearing for the 6-year plan, and probably be looking for approval in May or June, just depending on how that works out. But I do want to get that information back out in front of you. I have tried to keep up with the roads that you all give me throughout the year that are unpaved that you want to, listen, I think we've got them all, but I want to get that out in front of you where you can be looking at it. And we're moving forward with this year's construction program on unpaved roads. And this is what we are anticipating hard surfacing this year. The remainder of Jacks Hill Road, that will complete that. Also, we have another section on Cedar Creek 654, that will complete that road, and that road was almost 6 miles long. So hopefully that will get completed. This one right here, Ball Mountain, Route 643 came to the board. That's on construction plans this year. Whippoorwill 648, that's on our list. 765 Honeysuckle Lane, that is on the list to be paved this year. And
Did y'all get Ball Mountain?
yeah, Ball Mountain's on there.
That's what I did say.
After Honeysuckle Lane, we'll be looking to do 674 Cow Hollow. That's and I think we should be able to get Route 623, the last section of unpaved road on Davis Creek Road. So pretty aggressive list, but we're going to do our best to get those done this year. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot else to report to the board today. I'll be glad to take any concerns that you all have.
All right. Mr. Barton?
Thank you for Cedar Creek, people sitting down there.
Yeah. I don't know if our buddy's still there or not, but.
No, he's not.
Anything else, Mr. Barton?
No.
Mr. Harvey?
Nope.
Mr. Reed?
Nothing except good to see Davis Creek's gonna
I know.
get in there.
Pioneer. Did we do Perry Lane?
Yes, that's done about 4 years ago.
I was gonna say, I remember that specifically, yeah. All right. Mark?
Just take my number off your block. That's on your cell phone, please.
You're not blocked.
Yes. Not yet.
No, I have not.
Did y'all do Campbell's yet? Is Campbell's all the way done? Or is it,
Yes.
I guess to say
We
all
did
of
that
Campbell's?
last year.
I remember it. Okay, wow, that was
Yeah, we finished that this year.
pioneering some places up there. That's a pioneering some places up there
Oh, yeah.
in David's district.
Especially if you go down Chicken Hollow.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I do not have any at this time. I do have some roads I'd like to add to the list, but when we get closer to the 6-year plan, I'll bring them up. Other than that, if there's nothing else from the board, have a good day.
Thank you.
See you, Robert. All right, we got the jail here, superintendent, and Ben Wilson from Davenport. Now, first, I need to talk to the superintendent about something critical. Has our boy over here at the end of this table, Mr. Barton, been behaving?
He's been doing a great
Are you
job.
been thinking about throwing him, giving him a test run?
Great job. Thanks for moving house. Doing great. Thank you.
from my experience there.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to briefly introduce this subject. Over the past year or so, we've had a couple of presentations regarding the Albemarle Charlottesville Regional Jail renovation project. Just want to remind the board that that's been ongoing and they're quite yet in the planning phases and are here to talk to you today about project financing. So we have Ben Wilson here from Davenport and Company, who's the financial advisor to the regional jail, and also Colonel Martin Coomer, the jail superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board. Let's talk to you today. I'm going to turn over to Bill, see that Mr. Wilson, if you have any questions, he'll be right here.
Afternoon. Good to be here today. This is meant to be an informational session to just sort of go through the financing process for the jail renovation project. We're not asking you to take any action today. We just want you to be informed about what's going to be coming up over the next year and a half or so. Please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions along the way. I'm just going to work through this presentation and see where we go from there. All right. So just starting out on page 1 in the bottom right-hand corner, like I mentioned, we're going to go over an overview of the funding process. There are 2 parts to this funding process. You've got the interim financing and the permanent financing. And then we're going to talk about briefly sort of the cash flow impact to the county, which we'll get into at the end of this presentation. All right. So moving on to page number 2. So in Commonwealth, Virginia, as I'm sure you've heard over the past year or so, jails are eligible for 25% funding from the state to cover major renovation projects. So what that means is that you have to go through a somewhat rigorous process with the state to be able to make sure that they're signed off on the project and that they are willing to give that 25% reimbursement. And as I mentioned, it's a reimbursement, so you'll see part of this financing process is going to be getting the funds up front that to be able to pay for the project that the state will then come back and repay you for. All right. So, like I said, this process is a little bit long and stretched out. There are certain steps to it. You have to first get approved by the Board of Local and Regional Jails, which has already happened. Then you also have to get approved in the budget from the Commonwealth. That has not happened yet, but that's in process. So, moving on to page 3, there is a 2-part plan of finance, like I mentioned. The first part is an interim financing. So this is going to be a smaller borrowing that is planned to happen over the next couple months. And what's going to happen there is you're going to fund, like I said, a smaller amount than the large project itself. And in that amount, you'll be able to pay for the design and engineering costs to get a good estimate or a good cost for the project before going out and permanently financing the project. So that leads to part 2, which is the permanent financing and a grant anticipation note. So part 2 sort of has 2 components to it. One of which I mentioned a moment ago, the grant anticipation note, or a GAN. That will be for that 25% of the project that the Commonwealth is going to be covering. So you'll fund that 25% with this GAN. You'll be able to pay it off in a year or 2 when that grant comes through and the Commonwealth pays you back for the costs that you've incurred. The other part of it is a permanent financing, and that's going to be financed over a longer period of time. That permanent financing is also going to pay off the short-term interim financing that we're going to be doing over the next few months. And in that permanent financing, it'll be about a 25-year level debt service, so you'll have the same payments, mortgage style, every year. And you'll be able to see that, the numbers here, in a few pages. But like I mentioned, there's 2 parts to that one. So moving on to page 4, the cost estimate for this project is $49 million. For these purposes, we're going to assume that the eligible costs for that reimbursement from the state is about $48 million. As you can see at the bottom there, Based on the amended service agreement that you all put in place last year, the county is currently responsible for about 13% of the costs of the jail. That could change in the future as inmate counts move up and down for yourself as well as Albemarle and Charlottesville. So the interim financing. What we've assumed for now is that the borrowing amount of this interim financing will be about $5 million. Now that might change a little bit once we get closer to actually closing on that borrowing. But we've assumed a 4% interest rate and 18 months till it matures. The plan though is to pay that off before those 18 months occur. So the plan is to close on this one this June. It will have a maturity of 18 months, say December of 2024, but the plan would be to pay it off with that permanent long-term financing next summer in summer of 2024. Okay? So we have this timetable here that sort of gives a little bit more detail behind the plan for this interim financing. We are currently in that very first line there of us providing a briefing to each member jurisdiction. Once those briefings have been completed, hopefully by early April 2023, we'll be sending out a request for proposals to banks around the nation, around the state, and locally to get proposals for that interim financing. So we're going to be looking for a loan with approximately a 1.5 year maturity, and we're going to want to be able to pay it off next year with that permanent financing. So we would expect those responses to come back a few weeks later at the end of April. And for the month of May, we will be coming back to you all and presenting the results of that RFP process. And at that same time, we would ask that you all approve the financing itself. And once all 3 approvals come through and the authority approves it, we'll be able to close on that interim financing in June. At that time, once that closing occurs, we will have already known who the architect and engineer is going to be, so you'll have a much better understanding of how much exactly that architecture and engineering cost is going to be. That's going to be covered by that interim financing. All right, so now we're going to get into the permanent financing, which is something that is going to come back onto your plates next year. So this interim financing is going to unfold over the course of the next several months, hopefully closing in June, as long as everything goes according to plan. And then next year, the plan would be once the design is done and you're able to get bids on the project, you'll be able to go out to, I believe VRA is the option. Not decided yet? All right, so there could be 1 or more options for you all to fund the project. It could be through the Virginia Resources Authority, publicly issued bonds, or through a bank. But that will be determined closer to the point of actually borrowing those funds. So as you can see here in the table, we're looking at a GAN of about $13.5 million, which that GAN is going to again cover the 25% reimbursement that you would expect from the state once the project is substantially complete. And then the remainder of it, the $35.5 million, will be financed over 27 years with 2 years of interest only. So you're not going to be repaying any of the principal on the bond for those 2 years. And then 25 years of level mortgage style payments. And like I mentioned, at that point, you will have bid the project and you'll know the cost. So there won't be any question as to whether you're borrowing too much or not enough. All right. So just moving on to page 8, this provides a little bit of a timeline of that permanent financing. As you can see, that first blue bar, we're closing on the interim financing, expected to do that in June, with the design occurring over the next 12 to 18 months. The grant anticipation note and the permanent financing would be funded sometime in the summer of 2024. Based on this timeline, the substantial completion would be expected to happen sometime in 2025. And then after that, the Commonwealth could repay their 25% of the project, and you would be able to pay off that GAN that was in place. And the permanent financing would continue on until its maturity or until it's refunded. All right. Now, moving on to page 9, this just gives you some perspective on what those cash flows could look like. Now, these are preliminary estimates. We don't know exactly what these numbers are going to look like once that rolls around. I mean, it's a year and a half from now. However, based on these estimates, we're looking at a permanent financing of about $2.7 million per year once that comes into play. But for fiscal year 2024, which you can see in that second column there, we are estimating about $212,000 of interest associated with that. And that would be split based on your inmate count, just like all of the costs are with the authority. So for you all, that second to last column, about 13% of that would be about $27,500 in 2024. Now that will step up as the GAN and the permanent financing come into play starting in fiscal year 2025 to about $340,000. And then if all the inmate counts stay exactly the same, you're looking at about $350,000 per year. But as you all know, things can change and that number could vary a little bit. But this is just to give you a little bit of perspective on order of magnitude, what we'll be looking at once this debt service comes online. All right. Now, do any of you have any questions on the process or the analysis or anything?
Essentially, we're hoping to be done 2025, the building.
Yeah, end of 2025.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Can you shed any light on the General Assembly's likelihood that they're going to approve this and who's working on it? And
We are not, nobody's actually working on it as we speak. I will be meeting with our local representative, Sally Hudson, next week, hopefully to get her to advocate for us. We have no reason to believe that it wouldn't be approved. All the requests in the last several years that I'm aware of have been approved. We're fairly confident. We won't know until we know. So.
okay. And just one more question. Will the number of the cost of the allocation yearly that we will be paying, will that change depending on how many people we have that are being served at that time?
Yes, sir. Correct.
That'll be relative to how many inmates the county and the city have as well.
Right.
Okay. It's based on a 5-year average, so you won't see huge jumps from year to year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think that was all I had. If anyone else has any questions, we're happy to answer them. But
What do you got to say, Superintendent?
Well, I appreciate your support thus far, and I don't know, something we are actually had towards the facility, but I'm sure you agree that when needs a renovation is almost 50 years old. Kind of meet the needs of both my staff, the inmates, and the community as well. So again, I appreciate your support thus far. Thank you.
I was pretty impressed when I saw one of the facilities. I was reminded of the song 7 by 9.
Yeah.
Right? And it actually is 7 foot by 9. That was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you go and you tour the facility, you see the need.
Yeah.
But also, if you spend some time in the facility, you are impressed by operation of the people who work there and the dedication to their jobs, which is very unusual in terms of prisons. You know, and also the lowering numbers of people who are in the prison is impressive. And I happen to know people who are involved in the criminal justice system and who have impressed me. And they're not talking about treating the inmates with kid gloves. They're talking about lowering the recidivism and the fact that as a jail, this is a very impressive place, and we should be happy.
I think one thing is critically echoed across the region, by and large, is the emphasis on mental health. I mean, we've heard that y'all's check in, check out process, and even though it might not be the biggest number in the world, a lot of jails aren't even doing that in a good fashion. So mental health is a critical piece, and we should be very proud of what ACRJ does for us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions for Davenport or the jail? When should we be expecting to have to do action items? This budget or?
It will be June, I think.
This May is when we're gonna be coming back with proposals on that interim financing.
It would be very helpful for the local governments if we had this going into our budget.
I'm working on a budget now, and I'll have the estimate.
That'll have it with it.
Interest only is what, the $26,000, that will be.
Yeah, that's
for
easy.
sure.
Yeah, we can plan on incorporating that interest-only payment.
Okay, I was thinking, I wasn't sure if we, okay. Gotcha.
FY25.
FY25 is when the bigger chunk of change hits. We just need to be cognizant of that
Yes.
and saying that repeatedly. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Safe
you all
travels.
very much. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Wilson. All right, John.
Okay. You might do a better job.
Our next item of business is a jaunt presentation. We have Mr. Ted Wright, the Executive Director of Jaunt, here with us today. He's going to be discussing the Jaunt Transit Development Plan and then some possibilities for service expansion with FY24 funding.
Thank you. Again, thank you very much for having me here today. Again, I want to recognize Diane McNaught and Bradford, your representatives of the Jaunt Board. They're very active members on our board. In fact, Brad is on our finance committee and doing an outstanding job there. I just want to report that ridership in Nelson County on Jaunt has been growing. This represents the trend of our demand response service. We also provide a connect service to Charlottesville, but this represents mostly the service within the county. We've been seeing double-digit increases here, and we expect to continue to see that in the foreseeable future. We offer 3 services for the county. One is what we call a Nelson Circulator. It operates within the county. It actually serves about 2/3 of the county. We'll talk more about that, but it's only a 2-day-a-week service operating from about 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Another service, which is also demand response, operates 2 days a week, Mondays and Fridays, connects people within that same service area to Charlottesville and Albemarle County. Then finally, we offer a connect service, which is more like a commuter service, which takes people from the Livingston area all the way through to UVA and the Pantops area. As Candy mentioned, we are in the process of finishing up our transit development plan. In fact, our board will be asked to adopt it tomorrow. The plan is a 6-year look ahead of our transit system. It looks at some of our goals and where we want to be, what are some of the unmet needs, and also there's some financial planning for us as well. It's mainly kind of a guide for our operation. As part of the plan, we did a community survey of our riders, and this reflects ridership in our entire system. And generally, John is receiving very high marks from the ridership in terms of delivering cost-effective services. The plan, though, does highlight a tremendous need for transit services in the community. This is our 6-county plus Charlottesville service area. Nelson is in the southwest corner of that map. This is the concentrations of population below the poverty line. As you can see, in Nelson County, a fair amount of the county is occupied by people with above average poverty level, which tends to be a high need area for transit service. This is the concentration of older adults. The darker the number of the area, the higher the concentration. Again, in Nelson County, you've got a wide range of populations, but there is a significant population of older people in the county that also typically are a high need for this type of service. In addition to that, again, I'll focus your attention on the Southwest. We look at a number of criteria, including older population and poverty. We also look at people without automobiles in their homes. And we created what we call a population need index. And the darker the color, the higher the need for transit in the area. And again, Nelson is a leader among our service areas in terms of needing services. Among the recommendations of our transit development plan that affect mostly Nelson, one is a recommendation that we go to tech. We get a phone-based, smartphone-based app to allow people to book and track their trips on their phones, as well as going online. So we think that would be a more customer-friendly approach to service. We would also be looking at Uber-like services for jaunt. Currently, people need to call in and book a trip. We would hope that we could do that on a more spontaneous basis sometime in the future. In addition, the plan also recommended a number of service expansion recommendations, one of which that I want to focus mostly on is the Nelson Circular. That's the first service that I showed you earlier. Right now, it's a 2-day-a-week service and only serves about 2/3 of the geography of the county. We would propose to go to a 5-day-a-week service and provide countywide service. That's what this would look like. The blue is where we're serving today, 2 days a week. We would propose to extend to the pink area, which would include the Wintergreen Resort, we'll go to a 5-day-a-week service. So we would allow people who work within the county to hold jobs and to access other services throughout the county that they're not able to do so right now.
Excuse me, are you talking about the inter-county service?
Yes, intra-county service. Right. The other services are recommended for expansion as well, but we thought we'd start with this one first and see how that one goes. On our current budget request, I know this is not a budget meeting, but when you get to that, you'll see that our base, that's what we're doing today. We're proposing a $104,000 funding request. That's net federal and state funds. Today, you're providing $67,000, so it's a pretty significant increase over the current ask. Most of that's related to reduction in COVID-related funding that we enjoyed for the last couple of years. Also, we've seen an increase in demand for services, which is compelling us to increase service hours. Because of labor shortages, which I think many of you may be familiar with, we've had to increase our base wage for our bus operators by 20%. So all those factors are playing into the increase in our pricing for the base service. If the county commission supervisors wish to consider an expansion to add a 3-day-a-week service and go countywide, that would be another almost $99,000 a year. Again, that's after federal funding is applied to it. So that would bring the total budget for John in the area of $202,000 for next year. That compares to the current $67,000 a year. Again, that's a tremendous increase, but we think there's a tremendous need as well that this would represent. In many ways, John, public transit is a gateway service. It's a way to get to other services. As mentioned, that the Health Wellness Alliance is trying to improve healthcare outcomes in the county, and transportation would be a part of that. So transit is not for transit itself, it's to help people lead independent, dignified lives that they could not otherwise do. Most people don't want to be dependent on other people for their lives, and John provides that independence, that can-do spirit that is famous throughout the country and in Nelson, for example. We see increasing demand for services, and I think going to a 5-day-a-work-week service would be really welcome. Even despite the costs that we're showing you, For every dollar the county puts in, you're getting $3 worth of service. So it's a pretty good return on investment in public dollars.
Where's the other $2 coming?
Federal and state funds. We're able to leverage the county's contribution. What we do is we first go to the federal and state government to pay for the service, and then what's left over, we ask for the local government to contribute. So we're able to get $2 every three from the state and federal government. And that's it.
So you plan on, this is gonna be in your budget request for our coming cycle, right?
We made it an optional item. We have put in the base service. I'm not sure what the process would be to add this additional service. I think our actual budget documents we submitted to the staff is for the base service, but we did put an asterisk saying that this additional service could be made available. So it depends on if there's room in your budget to be able to do something like that.
Sure.
Is that correct? I mean, you got a big budget this time. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we had a couple people talk about what they contributed from volunteering and moving people around the different areas. Does John participate in that sort of thing where people are giving time?
Well, to my knowledge, John has not utilized volunteer bus operators, but volunteer bus operators is a common service delivery method. So we would be open to reviewing that, see how that might work with our current model. But
Yeah.
we haven't done it to my knowledge, but we certainly would be open to discussing it.
Well, will you do it? I mean, I listen to people talk about how they volunteered
Mm-hmm.
for the community. It would be better if what they did was integrated with John, don't you think?
I think so. I'm not familiar with the logistics of the volunteer workforce and how that works. So it would be something we'd have to take a look at. I'm not saying yes or no. I just don't know how it would work.
How would you take a look at it? What would the process be of taking a look at it?
Well, first, I would need to look at how reliable is a volunteer workforce. If someone didn't show up to work as supposed to, how do you deal with that? I don't know if people who are not employees of John could actually drive the vehicles. The vehicles are paid for by state and federal funds. I'm not familiar with the regulations as to whether a non-paid employee can do that. I don't know how our insurance carriers might react to it. There's a lot of business things to consider. I just don't know the answer to those and whether those would be insurmountable or not. I've seen volunteer driver programs elsewhere in the country, so I have to believe that there's a way to make that happen, but I just don't know how to do it.
I would like to see you try.
Well, I'm not saying we wouldn't try, I just can't commit to doing it, 'cause I just don't know.
Well, I don't.
I mean, I can say that I don't recommend it.
One of the suggestions I was gonna have it is a pretty big ticket item, is that we need to look at this with the guys of the budget, probably, since it is a healthy six figures. I think that would be the time we would be looking at this item, so make sure that you got all the info that you need to with your budget request. If you need to update that. Yeah. Is there any other questions for John, or any other comments?
I have a few. So the circulator would be an on-demand service?
Yes.
Okay. Would it be possible to include our senior centers, Gladstone, Fleetwood, and those on the circulator?
Well, the circulator works door to door, so if there's demand at a particular center, people are going there at the same time, that kind of thing, we would try to group the trips to make that work. There could be a demand for a more defined service, if that's what you're referring to. Again, that would be something we'd have to look at. Our goal is to maximize the productivity of the bus operator in the vehicle. So sometimes if you go to a more defined service with defined stops and times, you can get a more critical mass of riders on the vehicle. demand response tends to be less productive than a more fixed type service. So we would have to see if that could work, but we would certainly be open to doing that.
But the base service request basically covers what you're offering it.
Like it's a 2-day-a-week service for the circulator, it's a 2-day-a-week service for the link service, and then the 5-day-a-week for the connect, which goes to the UVA.
Okay. Hypothetical, say we approved the increase. That would, I'm assuming, depend on two things, what that would actually end up being. One would be the federal success in getting your federal grants. And the other would be how long it would take you to actually implement those changes. I know you really don't know what the federal grant scenario would be. How long would it take you from the time that we had a budget approval to actually having the services in place?
Well, on the first question, we're going to go ahead and submit a grant request to fund the Nelson service. If you decide not to do it, we just don't get the money and we give it back to somebody else.
Okay.
And we need to submit that by February 1st. And we should know by May, June if we're successful in getting that money. In terms of doing a startup, if there is a commitment from the county and we feel good about the federal side, then we can start considering starting up probably I would hope in 6 months. There would be a marketing effort to be able to decide. We have to make sure we have sufficient drivers. We have plenty of vehicles, so the vehicles wouldn't be a problem. So I would think we could start sometime in the fall of 23 if this was approved. If we do a partial year, that may reduce the county commitment.
Yeah, that was my point.
Proportionally as well.
Yeah, first
If you want to start in January, then it would be half that. So that could be a possibility. It'll test to get you through the years.
All right, any other questions? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Safe travels, and thank you all for coming. Thank you, Diana, for representing us. All right, moving on to this next item. There's no next item. New and unfinished business. Master plan development proposal. Candy.
Okay, previously the board had authorized staff to follow up with architectural partners regarding submittal of a proposal for master planning services of the former Larkin property. In your packet, you have that proposal, which outlines the scope of investigation and gives a preliminary list of things that might be considered in the master planning process that have been discussed at one time or another in meetings with them. Those things being recreation center design, allowing phasing ranging from a simple park and playground to the full build out of a recreation center as described in the 2021 study. Athletic fields as described in our 2021 recreation center study as may be further defined or requested in conjunction with the high school, middle school needs and planning, whether or not to develop an industrial/manufacturing site, the potential for housing development of some sort on the site, possibility of a career and technical education facility on site near the middle school, high school campus, potential for a reservoir which would address water capacity needs as well as recreational opportunities, something similar to Lake Monacan in the Nellis Ford area. The potential for energy opportunities such as hydroelectric and solar power generation, and the proposed future use of existing school property for an FFA facility with livestock. So those are some of the things that they would work with the board and staff to identify and pare down as priorities within the study proposal. On the second page, the specific services that will be provided include one meeting on site with interested parties to walk the property, generally assessing the topography, access, and suitable locations for buildings and recreation fields. Up to 4 meetings in Nelson County with interested parties to review developing concepts and direction. the production of a digital rendered master plan drawing to scale indicating all proposed improvements in phases as needed along the property lines and existing conditions, including access roads, adjacent buildings and facilities, existing waterways, and existing topography as readily available from the county's GIS system. Also, investigation and documentation of existing utilities and infrastructure if needed. Some of this information may have been provided with previous work by the Timmons Group, which we'll have to take a look at. It would also include compilation of companion written document providing an executive summary along with more details of the master plan, particularly related to the recreation center program and design, field uses, overall schedule, and current cost estimates. Then there would be up to 2 meetings presenting the final documents to the board of supervisors or other interested parties. They could begin this work upon receipt of signed approval, and they anticipate final deliverables to be completed in May of 23, depending on the ability to have the necessary conversations and reviews within that time period. And they have proposed a not to exceed amount of $36,000 for these services. So we didn't include a resolution with this, but for your consideration is authorizing staff to proceed with the proposal as presented or make some modifications to it before authorization.
All right, what's the board think? Here's a recommendation that we move forward as presented.
I
Unless you
just
have
have questions. Like, should we be going forth with our priorities first instead of this whole conglomerate of activities, which
Part of the master planning process would be to meet with you all and determine what those priorities are. And then that way they can help guide us in the master planning, and then
I think that should be done as soon as possible. Because, if you get bogged down in all this stuff, we'll never get anywhere. Where we, right from the beginning, when we determined to buy this property, we knew it would be incremental. What we did. That's.
right.
Sure.
I think the goal is just to, have a thoughtful process and for the board to decide, what their priorities are for the property and be thoughtful about how things could work together and where they might go in order to
We have to do this
maximize
because we don't want
the
to
benefits of the property.
use property that better used for something else.
Yes.
I understand. But we still need to move forward.
Correct. And this would be the first step in that moving forward process.
So I'm assuming that on approval, we would take a look at, we would meet with the consultants very soon and delete those things under scope of investigation and add those things that are on the second page that we wanted to get in there, get an updated cost, and then start moving on it. It makes me really happy to see that they're looking at May 2023 as having all the deliverables.
Yeah.
I think that means in the short term, we're going to have to be pretty aggressive in terms of working with them and really focus on this to be able to meet that goal. But
That's good. They're going to be coming to some budget work sessions, it looks like.
well, it will be budget season at the same time that
Yeah.
we're doing this, so it means we're going to have an aggressive schedule coming up for the next few months.
That's correct. Or we could work with them to extend it as needed. I mean, it just depends, like you said, on what things we have going on and how we can integrate it into those things as well.
Yeah, in some ways, simplifying our needs would be helpful because it would make
That would
things
be helpful, yes.
We get a motion to approve as presented or give Candy a general consensus.
I prefer a motion if you don't mind.
All right, let's get a motion.
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Parry, a second.
I'll second.
Second, Mr. Reed, any discussion? No discussion, let's do a roll call vote.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Paz?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes. All right.
Thank you very much.
The next item, I kind of have another update to the judge parking.
Yes, may I go grab my,
Yeah.
bring that with me?
So we have a judge requesting for some alterations for a parking situation. Candy probably could best describe what that is.
Something that's worked for years and years and ain't had a minute's problem.
Yep. And I think Candy, if you probably should just present it for now, and then I'll give us an update where we're at.
Okay, in the board's packets, you have two letters, one from Judge Stilley, who's our juvenile and domestic court relations judge, and also Judge Sam Evelson from General District Court, both requesting that the board consider installing a more permanent parking area for those two judges in the back area of the courthouse. I think they both cite, security reasons and accessibility reasons for their request. They had made this request at some point verbally last year. The board was surprised at that request in a budget work session and no action was taken. Mr. Carter did reach out to Ms. Florence Hernandez, who is the owner of the property on which this parking area would be, to get her input on the potential of getting an easement for use of the access road and the parking area behind the courthouse. We had not received a response from her on that, so should the board but should look further into this, we would reach back out to Ms. Hernandez and see her pulse on providing an easement for that access road and parking.
So before the meeting, I think it's probably important that we have a meeting with the judges, myself, staff, maybe another board member, just to kind of figure out what's going on and if there's any mediation that we could do before we start, putting in permanent things on someone else's property that we don't own, that we don't even have permission to do yet. Another important thing is to check and see if the circuit court judge is not going to order it. Because if they do that, then we have no choice to do it. So trying to head this off, I have a brief conversation with Ms. Bryant, who's going to indicate, and she had indicated more than likely, Mr. Doucette will be willing to meet with us. And I've also spoken to both clerks, General and JDR, and I have mentioned having a meeting to discuss this, and they said that probably would be a very good idea. So I was going to suggest before the board made any action that we have this meeting with the judges and see what's going on, see if we can propose anything different. And of course, need to find out if the circuit court judge is going to be ordering this, because if the circuit court judge orders it, it shall be done, and it will be done.
How big a parking lot are they looking?
It's not massive. The issue is where and how, because it's land we don't own.
It would just be one spot that would
Yeah.
be shared by both judges, is my understanding, because they're here on alternate days.
Yeah.
It's one spot.
It'd be,
We can't find space for one spot.
well,
There is
where they want it
space.
is on the back side of the courthouse, it's on property the county doesn't own.
So does that mean there has to be a driveway to this one
Correct,
spot?
there has to be an access road to the one spot.
And I would emphasize, our courthouse is handicap accessible. It is ADA compliant, and we do have access in other places, right? This one is just one the judges are specifically asking for. So I think a meeting would be great with the judges so we could kind of maybe head off some of this, and maybe logistically from that meeting, we might find out a certain direction that they might even force us to go. And we could do some groundwork in interacting with Florence if that is the direction we have to go.
Well, we see, first of all, is the land available?
So it's not for sale. We have to go to the landowner.
That's what I know.
Yeah.
Is the landowner willing to talk?
And we
And we
can
reach out to her
explore,
in the meantime.
we
too,
can
and see,
explore that.
Yeah, what her thoughts are on that process.
But what I would suggest is we see if there's any other things that we could help facilitate before we start trying to do these major acquisitions and improvements.
Just for the board's information, I did reach out to both of the clerks and, told them this would be on the agenda and invited them to be here if they wished, and I'm not sure
No, they
if
didn't.
they are, but.
They probably didn't because I set up about a meeting.
Yeah.
So let's have a meeting with the judges and we can outreach to 2 sets, secretary, and then let's see what we can figure out. I'll be,
Then we can report back.
yeah, in
Once
February.
we have something.
Have we
to
got any
report.
little space anywhere up here?
Parking,
In the building,
available space in the building to do what?
to put the offices in.
Oh, they have offices.
They would have offices with parking.
Well, they need access to these courtrooms
These
here.
courtrooms
this
here.
floor, and their offices are on the rear
I've
side
never
of the
been there.
building. They have a rear access, but there's a long staircase that extends down to the ground back there. And then they walk around the side to the front to,
It's with the handicap access.
handicapped ADA accessible parking that's along the front row on the left of the building. And I think some of their concerns are that in an emergency, they may be forced to, walk through people attending court that may not be too happy with them.
So it's an emergency, it won't make any difference.
To them, that presents a security issue.
Okay. So let's
That's where we are
Yeah.
right now.
have that meeting and then we'll figure it out from there. All right,
Thank
moving on. Don't worry, you're not done yet. County administrator.
That's my report now.
You want to go with me to that meeting?
All right. Just gonna start out with an update on the comprehensive plan. Our project website, of course, is www.nelson2042.com. The second of 4 scheduled joint work sessions of the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission is scheduled for January 18th, 2023, where draft content regarding natural and historic resources and community facilities and infrastructure will be reviewed. An intermediate focus group work session with stakeholders on these items was held in the interim. We just discussed the proposal from Architectural Partners on the former Larkin property development, so I won't go into that. I will add, though, that an initial brainstorming session of the sports committee was held, and the Nelson County Recreational Needs Assessment Survey was initiated, with the survey deadline being January 15th. The survey was emailed out in a direct email blast to those registered for Parks and Recreation, Planning and Zoning, Tourism and Economic Development, and to Nelson County employees. The link was also sent to the school division for their dissemination, and other dissemination efforts include posting on the county's website, Parks and Recreation social media, posting flyers at Parks and Rec basketball locations, the Blue Ridge Trail, Rail Trail, the Blue Ridge Tunnel Trail, the courthouse, and Parks and Rec office. And I have in my report, as of January 6th, we had 202 responses received, with 186 surveys fully completed. I saw Mr. Jerry West this afternoon, and he said it was approaching 500 responses. So that's great. Our next work session to begin the master planning process phase is to be determined.
Robert, that's great. How do you work with that many people?
It's just a survey response that they do online and submit the responses, and then all of that's compiled into results using SurveyMonkey.
How you do it, 500 people?
It is a lot. I've been reporting on the regional library agreement review the last couple of months. This is done every 5 years with the members of the regional library and the executive director, David Plunkett. The last meeting was held on December 16th, and the paramount consideration is keeping or not the out-of-area fee and its impact on member library costs. This primarily impacts Charlottesville and Albemarle. Another review meeting is to be scheduled. Let's see, next I would like to discuss the emergency services coordinator response to the Ryan School Apartments on December 25th and 26th. As reported by Emergency Services Coordinator Atkins in his report, multiple county departments and emergency services agencies responded to conditions at Ryan School Apartments on the evening of December 25th, which necessitated their relocation to a shelter at the Livingston Volunteer Fire Department for about a 24-hour period. The apartment's owner, Piedmont Housing Alliance, relocated the residents and made the necessary repairs for rehabilitation, and residents were returned to their units after a couple of days. I would like to publicly thank everyone involved, including Chair Rutherford, who left their families on Christmas and the day after to provide assistance to these folks.
Just one clarification on this.
Yes, sir.
Ryan School Apartments is actually owned by Java, and it's managed by Piedmont Housing Alliance.
Okay, thank you for the
So,
clarification.
yeah, because what happened was, one thing that I found out subsequently is that Java wasn't informed about this until after a lot of things had happened. They weren't on the first line of information in terms of what was happening. So just want to make sure that chain is clear, so
Yes,
that if
thank
something
you.
happens in the future, that they are able to respond in ways that they possibly can.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much for that clarification. Going forward. On the employee compensation study, the market survey of other agencies for benchmark positions has been completed. MAG is now aging the market data forward to accommodate the changes from the 2022 point of initial participation of peers and competitors to reflect a forward-facing salary structure that recognizes the changes by integrating the employment cost index for public administration, the consumer price index, and the adjustments to Social Security, recognizing the Social Security market update anticipated for 2023. MAG has indicated that overall the county is definitely lagging the market, and proposed adjustments should be anticipated to both the salary ranges for positions and to provide some internal equity adjustments to individual salaries. The draft report for internal staff review is anticipated by the end of January, and this will identify proposed grade levels for all positions included in the scope of the study and possible implementation costs. Following the internal review, the final report will be presented by MEG for the board's consideration. With the Gladstone Depot TAP grant, Mr. Jay Brown of Lynchburg VDOT office has advised that VDOT staff can administer the project on behalf of the county were to move forward. And this would be made part of the draft TAP agreement in process at the VDOT central office in Richmond. He will be in touch early in the new year to schedule a meeting with stakeholders to discuss the project. And we're still waiting for the actual draft TAP agreement to come to the county from the central office. And at that point, the board can consider moving forward with the signing the agreement or not. The county was awarded $41,389 in Virginia Department of Forestry Forest Sustainability Grant Funds. The grant fund program assists localities that provide a lower forest land tax rate to landowners by restoring a portion of foregone revenues back to localities. This year, 68 localities submitted applications with a foregone revenue amount of nearly $72.5 million. Per the code, monies from the fund must be used solely for public education generally or for projects related to outdoor recreation or forest conservation. In relation to opioid abatement grants, county staff met recently with the Nelson Community Wellness Alliance to discuss the county's support of a rural community's opioid response grant application. Additionally, plans to meet with them and Region 10 are in the works to discuss the potential for an application to the State Opioid Abatement Authority and to identify any synergies between these two grant opportunities. As Mr. Rutherford noted during the VDOT report, the bridge dedication for the Lake Godfrey Miles was held on December 30th at the Fauver Rescue Squad building in Fauver. A brief program was conducted by Chair Rutherford, who spoke, as well as CTB member Mr. Bert Dodson Jr. and other attendees. And this was followed by unveiling of the dedication sign, and also actually installation of the dedication sign. And that was a really nice event, as noted by Mr. Brown and Mr. Rutherford. Rutherford did a wonderful job at the ceremony. We have no change from December's report on the new office building. We're working on a draft MOU with Offender Aid Restoration for management of the drug court. This is pending OAR's review and then subsequent approval by the board. Once in place, the first order of business would be to fill the drug court coordinator position, which is OAR's responsibility under the MOU. Short-term rentals, our Commissioner Revenue Campbell provided the Commissioners Association standardized forms and recommended standardized local transient occupancy tax ordinance language pertaining to third-party payment remitters. Staff is currently reviewing those documents. Commissioner and county staff are in the process of participating in demos with vendors that provide short-term rental tracking services in order to provide a recommendation regarding procurement of such services. An informative letter regarding short-term rentals to all property owners following tax season, as was proposed at the initial work group meeting, is still pending.
So where are we at this?
So right now, we're reviewing some documents the commissioner provided that the Commissioners Association wants everyone to use so that it's sort of a standardized process between localities. And then we're also looking at various, platforms, so to speak, vendors that have platforms that will go out and look for short-term rentals in your community and provide you with a slick dashboard that tells you, how many there are and who owes what, and so you can kind of compare what they say you should be receiving in transient occupancy tax to what you're actually receiving from third-party collectors and remitters like Airbnb or VRBO.
Is it your opinion we're making progress on this?
I think so, yes, definitely. Yes. All right, we already discussed the Albemarle Charlottesville Regional Jail renovation project and the upcoming financings. As far as our FY22 audit, where county staff is wrapping up review of the management discussion and analysis portion of the audit, and this will be incorporated into the final document. The final audit report should be finalized in the next month, with Robinson Farmer Cox Associates being scheduled to report to the board, likely the February or March meeting. Likewise, Mr. Cooch from Davenport will be providing an update on the county's debt capacity based on the FY22 draft audit report at the February 14th board meeting. There's no change from December's report on the Renaissance Ridge housing development, and I believe all departments and office reports were included in your December or January packet.
All right, any other questions for Candy at this time?
Just one, the revenues from the Forest Sustainability Fund Act. What's the process going to be to determine how best to use those funds?
I think, well, I mean, I haven't really given it a great deal of thought just yet, but just some preliminary conversations with Parks and Rec potentially. If any of the supervisors have some input on that, I'm happy to take that. and we can have a meeting and if we need to come back and present to the full board what the use of those funds would be, we can do that as well.
Okay. We got, we'll receive those funds, when we decide how they're gonna be allocated and then create a budget for them, so it'll be in the budget cycle.
Yes, I mean, we should be receiving those funds very shortly.
Okay, so we might actually receive them this fiscal year.
Oh, yes, we'll definitely be
Oh,
receiving
okay.
them probably in the next month.
Okay.
Yes, and so then we will, that will be included in the budget appropriation, budget amendment for you all to appropriate those funds and then we can, I don't think we're under any time frame to decide how to use them.
Might be good before the budget, so we have an idea what to do. Thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions for Candy? Hearing none. Candy? Moving on to board reports. Mr. Barton.
Well, the jail board did not meet. They were having a COVID outbreak there,
Yeah.
which is interesting. The meeting having to do with employment is pretty much the same thing. The problem is not jobs, finding people to do the jobs. And you discuss once again, well, maybe higher pay might entice people to work.
Who are we enticing to work anymore?
I don't know.
It's more, need folks from maybe across the border come do some work.
Well, you know,
Did they talk about that at all? Did they implement like the migrant worker piece at all?
they talk about it.
In terms of an answer to
To
workforce shortage?
Finding employment.
Yes.
People to work.
Yeah.
I'm reluctant to speak in a negative way about this whole situation. But people have chosen not to go back to work. I think capitalism works when a person, labor is enticed to work by increasing the amount of money you pay them. We live in a society that seems to like to entice capital to invest. And capital is a wonderful thing to have and becoming very rich, but not so much for labor. And, and resources are underpriced too, and so
Have you bought a dozen eggs this week?
If you want to talk about the state of the world, is we have a real problem in our society with the distribution of income, where the rich some people think that having billions or even trillions of dollars is somehow a person deserves that money. Where my experience in my life
Is this what
has been that person who chases wealth for their life is missing what life is about. But however, people who chase money often get it, but they usually get it because they're lucky. And they become rich. And then they decide that intelligence is based on how much money you have. And they think that society should make decisions to benefit the wealthy. I think that's a crock. I welcome to be able to say that as a public figure. I mean,
All right, so we gotta get to board
I said
reports and
enough.
you've
I
now
think I
gone
said
too
enough.
far.
I mean,
Yep.
you can make.
All right, any other board reports from you? All right, Mr. Harvey.
No, but I have a lot of answers for yours.
All right. You can save them for the end. Mr. Reed?
I just wanted to report with the service authority that the Wintergreen and Skylar water treatment plants and replacement is going full bore, and they're working very hard on both of those systems. But they're going to be applying for grant funding in March to be able to have a GIS mapping system for the service areas of the service authority, so that they don't have to. It wasn't implemented quicker because there was an opportunity to get some grant funding for it. So hopefully we'll be able to get some support to be able to, collaborate with our GIS mapping and have all that information available to both the service authority and the county.
Wonderful. What else? All right. Mr. Farr.
EMS council did not meet, and social services is just anxiously awaiting the next steps in the process for their new home.
Great. Wonderful. All right, moving on. Only reports I have. We have the Regional Housing Partnership meeting coming up in affordable housing meeting on, where did I put it? The 24th. I will be sending out the invites here soon, so please put that in your schedule. We'll be talking about the affordable housing issues of our region, bringing in a bunch of stakeholders from out of in and around Virginia, rural development, Virginia housing, and so many other stakeholders who have a lot of data to talk about the housing issues of our area. So please put them.
What's the date on that?
That would be March the 24th. Thank you. Just mark off your whole day. And I need to, and if you do want to go, send me an email so I can send it over to them so I can get you signed up. All right. Beyond that, I don't think we had anything PDC related. We did have a planning commission meeting related to the dog training facility that was voted to be put off a month for more information. So that will be Ernie's job like next week. So I threw it off on you. Beyond that, that is all I have to report. Moving on to appointments. Is there any appointments that need to happen? I was just looking.
None that need to happen today.
List came different.
Just provided you with a list for upcoming appointments for the year. We will advertise the James River Alcohol Safety Board. I have spoken with Mr. Hall. He does sell our serve, but we always advertise.
Yep.
Expired insurance.
Yep. Sounds good. All right. No appointments. Moving on to correspondence. Any correspondence, Mr. Barton? Mr. Harvey? Mr. Reed?
No.
Mr. Parham? Directives, Mr. Barton?
I just want to say that I'm encouraged, like Ernie, that we're moving forward on providing recreation for the people of Nelson County, and that this board is acting in the interest of the people.
Thank you. Mr. Harvey? Good. Mr. Reed?
Nothing.
Mr. Parr? I have none. Before we go into closed session, let's have a quick recess, 5 minutes.
You should never ask me a question.